My daughter gave my villa to her husband's family. Not sold. Not borrowed. Gave, like it was hers to give. I drove up there for a quiet weekend, expecting silence and pine-scented air. Instead, a woman I'd never met opened the door wearing my robe and holding my coffee mug. She blinked at me, then smiled politely. "I'm sorry, do you need something?" I stared at her. Behind her, my furniture, my art, my memories. I took a slow breath. "I'm here," I said, "because this house belongs to me." She tilted her head, amused. "Oh, you must be Madison's father." It still echoes in my ears, that careless voice, light as steam rising off the coffee she poured into my mug without asking. She didn't seem like a cruel woman, just entitled in that lazy, confident way some people wear like perfume. Her name was Donna, Palmer's mother, and by the look of things, she'd already unpacked. A small dog barked from the living room, one of those yappy types, all teeth and nerves. A dog I never approved inside my house. I stepped forward without asking permission. The hallway smelled like lavender air freshener. The cheap kind. The kind that masks things. Carl, Palmer's father, sat on my leather armchair flipping through my travel books like he was browsing a hotel lobby. He glanced up, surprised but not embarrassed. "Oh, hey there. You must be the homeowner. Madison said you were fine with us staying for a bit." A bit? It was already too much. Donna walked in behind me. "We brought our own groceries. And we'll keep the place tidy, promise. This house is just so lovely. It's like a dream." A dream. My dream. Built with 40 years of sweat and second mortgages. Furnished by the woman I buried 3 years ago, who died before she ever got to see it finished. And now, Madison had turned it into a guest house for strangers. I turned around and walked back to my car without saying another word. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my study in the city, lights off, the silence heavy around me. The villa's floor plan was still open on my laptop. I'd been working on minor upgrades. Heated floors in the guest bathroom. Maybe a new wine cellar. But suddenly, none of it felt like mine anymore. I stared at my phone, then called her. Madison picked up after 4 rings. "Dad, you gave them my house," I said flatly. A pause, then a sigh. "Okay, I figured Donna might overstep. But relax, it's just for a little while. Palmer's parents need a break. Mom's birthday is always hard for them, too." I closed my eyes. Elaine wasn't their mother, Madison. "I know," she said quickly. "But they're still family." "No, they're your husband's family. I'm your father. You're also the one who said you didn't like being up there alone. That doesn't mean it belongs to them." The next thing she said, I still remember word for word. "Dad, maybe it's time to let some things go. You don't even live there full time. You're holding on to memories. They need a home." I didn't respond. Not at first. When I finally spoke, my voice surprised even me. "You gave them a key." Silence. "You gave them my key. They don't have anywhere else to go," she snapped. "And Palmer and I are already paying for their insurance and groceries. And just let this be easy for once. Please." "Easy," I repeated. "For whom?" The next weekend, I drove up again. This time, I brought a friend, a real estate lawyer named Ben I'd worked with for 20 years. We didn't go inside. We parked across the street and sat in silence watching the show. They were throwing a barbecue. Palmer flipping burgers on my patio grill. Donna setting up citronella candles on my teakwood table. Carl adjusting the cushions on Elaine's favorite bench. Guests arrived. For couples. Laughter filled the backyard like fog. Ben leaned back in the seat, shook his head slowly. "Have they filed any tenancy paperwork?" "No," I said. "Good," he said. "That makes this salvageable. For now." He didn't ask the obvious question. Why had I let it get this far? Because when your daughter says, "Trust me," you try. When your only child says, "It's just temporary," you believe her. When she says, "They're struggling," you remember being young and broke and scared. You want to believe she's still the little girl who used to crawl into your bed during thunderstorms. But that girl doesn't exist anymore. 2 nights later, I received the message that turned my stomach inside out. "Madison, just letting you know Donna and Carl are changing their address officially to the villa. It's only temporary, but helps with paperwork stuff. Hope you understand." I called her. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "Madison, no." No answer. Next day, a utility company emailed me, asking for confirmation about a billing transfer. Palmer had submitted a form, pretending to be me. That was the moment something snapped. Not just inside me, inside the foundation of who I thought I was as a father. I met with Ben again. We started pulling documents. Ownership, deed, usage rights. And then I remembered something. Last year, Madison had brought me a stack of papers, told me it was just estate prep for emergencies. I trusted her. I signed. Ben flipped through them now, his face growing darker. Here, he said. This clause. It grants her authority to make limited residential usage decisions. Enough for short-term access. Not permanent. No. But enough to cause problems. If they push it. What kind of problems? He looked at me. The kind that take time, money, and stress to undo. Especially if they claim you gave verbal consent. That evening, I called Madison again. This time, she picked up. You forged my signature. Her pause was longer than usual. I didn't forge anything. Palmer just, look, it was for convenience. We didn't think you'd care. You didn't think I'd care that someone else is living in my home? You act like we bulldozed the place. They're taking care of it. You should be grateful. I was quiet. Too quiet. Then, she added something that turned my blood cold. If you really loved me, you'd make space for the people I love. There it was. The weapon. Guilt, disguised as righteousness. Love, measured in square footage. I took a slow breath, then hung up. The next morning, I packed a bag. Not to stay at the villa. To observe. To plan. Because when someone tries to steal your house, you don't just kick them out. You make sure they never try it again. You don't realize how long your fuse is until someone strikes it one too many times. For 3 weeks, I said nothing. I didn't call Madison. I didn't show up at the villa. I didn't argue, accuse, or plead. But I watched. Through my attorney's emails. Through neighbors' quiet texts. Through the silence that stretched between me and my daughter like a wire. Thin, tense, ready to snap. I thought, if I confront her too soon, she'll twist it. If I push too hard, she'll play the victim. So I waited. And I studied. And I planned. The final straw came from a neighbor. Annette, a kind widow who lived 2 houses down from the villa, called me just before sunset on a Thursday. Charles, she said gently. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but there's a for sale sign on your lawn. I felt the blood drain from my hands. They're what? It's one of those discreet listings. Palmer showed a couple around today. Said you'd pass the place on to them. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the floor for a long time. Selling it. They weren't just using my house. They were trying to get rid of it entirely. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I made lists. Lawyers. Deeds. Transfer loopholes. I also made a second list. Not names. Not contacts. Just words. Humiliation. Control. Pattern. Permission. Boundary. Weakness. Dad, relax. They need it more than you. You're always alone anyway. I stared at that last one the longest. Alone. That's what this had always been about. They thought I'd roll over, because I had no one left to fight for. But they'd forgotten something. I still had myself. And I'd finally remembered how to fight. Friday morning, I met with Ben at his office. He was already reviewing the property documents I'd brought him 3 weeks earlier. I want it locked down, I said. No sales. No access. No accidental transfers. I don't want Madison's name anywhere near it. Ben nodded. We'll start with ownership reinforcement. Then create a land trust in your name only. After that, I recommend you place a legal freeze on any third-party transactions. How long? 3 to 5 business days. Less if we rush it. I want it rushed. He looked at me for a moment, then said, What changed? I slid my phone across the table. The photo Annette had sent me. Palmer, in my yard, smiling beside a young couple as they toured the garden Elaine had planted with her bare hands. Ben nodded slowly. That'll do it. The next step wasn't legal. It was psychological. Madison didn't respond to anger. She weaponized it. If I yelled, she'd call me dramatic. If I begged, she'd say I was overreacting. But silence. Silence was unpredictable. So I stopped responding entirely. To her texts. To her emails. To the voicemail Palmer left calling me unreasonable. The less I gave, the more she wanted. By Tuesday, my inbox was full of her voice. Dad, we really need to talk. This is getting out of hand. Palmer's parents are just trying to feel safe. We thought you'd be proud of us taking initiative. Please call me. Just once. She hadn't said I'm sorry. Not once. By Wednesday, Ben had completed the freeze. Ownership of the villa was now in a protective land trust, with all legal activity routed through him. No access without written authorization. Not even Madison could sign a trash pickup form. I told him, good. Now I want to tell them. He raised an eyebrow. You're sure you don't want to wait? No, I said. They need to learn what happens when they mistake silence for surrender. I drove up Thursday morning. No announcement. No warning. I parked in the neighbor's driveway. Annette waved at me from her kitchen. They didn't see me coming. I walked up the front steps like I had 1,000 times before, except this time, I knocked. Hard. The door opened to reveal Palmer. Hair messy, wearing a t-shirt with my alma mater on it. His smile froze when he saw me. Charles. Wow. Didn't know you were coming today. Clearly. He stepped aside, uncomfortably. The house smelled different. Like someone else's detergent. Someone else's food. My walls had new art. Cheap, cheerful prints of wine bottles and sunsets. The bookshelves had been reorganized. My favorite first editions were gone. I didn't ask where. Carl was napping on the couch. Donna was in the kitchen, blending something green. Oh, hello there, she chirped. We just made smoothies. Want one? I stared at her. No. I'm just here to deliver some news. Palmer stiffened beside me. What kind of news? I turned to him. You no longer have access to this house. Effective immediately. He laughed. What? I've revoked all informal permissions. The property is now under a private trust. All access is trespassing. Donna set her glass down slowly. But Madison said. I don't care what Madison said. Carl stirred awake. What's going on? Palmer took a step toward me, his jaw clenched. You're being unreasonable. This is her inheritance. You told her the villa would always be hers someday. Yes, I said quietly. Someday. After I was gone. Palmer said nothing. Donna tried to smile. We've been taking such good care of it. You should have seen the new herb garden. I did, I said. It's gone. Along with everything else I recognized. Then I handed Palmer a folder. Inside, legal notice of restricted access, trust documentation, and a reminder that any further occupation would be met with immediate police action. Get your things, I said. You have 48 hours. He stared at the papers like they were in another language. Then he said what people like him always say when they've run out of power. You'll regret this. I nodded once. No, Palmer. You will. I didn't wait for them to respond. I left the folder on the coffee table, turned around, and walked out. When I got back in the car, my hands were shaking. Not from fear. From relief. Because for the first time in years, I'd said no, and meant it. Not with anger. Not with threats. Just clarity. And that is what scared them most. That night, Madison called. I didn't answer. The next morning, she sent 10 messages. The 12th said, You think you've won, but you've just lost your family. I stared at it for a long time, then typed back. If that's what family looks like to you, I'm okay with the loss. I hit send, then turned off my phone. For the first time since Elaine's funeral, I sat in silence that didn't feel empty. It felt earned. It felt like mine again. There's a silence that means surrender. And then there's the kind that means strategy. Madison still hadn't figured out the difference. It started 3 days after I served them the eviction papers. A knock at my door. Sharp. Uninvited. I opened it to find her standing there. No call. No warning. No apology. Just Madison. Sunglasses on. Coat unbuttoned. Arms crossed like she'd walked into a courtroom instead of her father's house. We need to talk, she said. I stepped aside wordlessly. She walked in like she still owned something. In my study, she sat on the edge of her usual chair, the one Elaine used to read in, and stared at me like I'd betrayed her. Not the other way around. You blindsided us, she began. No, I said quietly. I corrected you. She exhaled through her nose. They're devastated. You embarrassed them. I didn't ask them to move in. They had nowhere else to go. I raised an eyebrow. And you thought that entitled them to my life's work? I thought, she snapped, that you were better than this. There it was again, the reversal. The guilt dagger. She looked around the room like it was foreign. This place hasn't changed in years, she said softly. You just live in it. Alone. Surrounded by ghosts. I live in peace, I replied. Until you try to steal it. Madison stood up. Fine. If this is how you want things. It's not, I said. But it's how they have to be. She stared at me. A long, cold stare. And then said the most carefully crafted line of the afternoon. You know, there's a lot of people who'd be interested to hear how you treat your only daughter. The next day, it began. First, a Facebook post. Just vague enough to deny intent. Ever feel like the people who are supposed to love you the most only care about their property? I didn't respond. Then, an Instagram story, a photo of Palmer's parents sitting on boxes in a parking lot, looking miserable. Kicked out. By blood. No heart left in this family. Still, I said nothing. She was testing for noise. For weakness. For guilt. But I'd built an empire from concrete and contracts. She should have known better. On Thursday, an email came. From a local blog. One of those community gossip sites disguised as journalism. We're doing a human interest piece on elder property disputes. Your daughter Madison Brennan mentioned you might be willing to comment. I stared at the screen. So that was her next move. If she couldn't win quietly, she'd try to win loudly. I wrote back. I will not be participating. If anything about me is published without my written consent, expect legal action. No response. 2 hours later, the post was live. A full-length piece titled, When Family Means Fences, The Rise of Real Estate Betrayals. They never used my name. But they didn't have to. Photos of the villa. Quotes from a close family source. Details only Madison could have shared. I read it once. Just once. Then closed the browser and made another list. Not of lawyers this time. Of boundaries. Because this wasn't about land anymore. This was about dignity. The next day, Palmer showed up. He came alone. Suited up, trying to look respectable. I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. Mr. Brennan, he began, hands folded. I'd like to talk man to man. I didn't blink. About what? He swallowed. About undoing the damage. About finding a path forward. I leaned against the doorframe. That path was closed the moment you let your parents put a for sale sign in my yard. His jaw tightened. Look, he said, shifting tactics. We all made mistakes. But it's getting out of hand. People are talking. Your reputations. I smiled. There it is. He hesitated. You don't care about the house. You care that people are watching you lose it. He said nothing. So I stepped closer. I built that home with my wife. For her. For peace. And you tried to steal it under the illusion of family. It wasn't stealing, he mumbled. No, I said. Then why did you lie to utility companies? To her buyers? Move furniture before even asking? He had no answer. I'm done, I said. Tell Madison I don't negotiate with extortionists. Even the ones I raised. Then I closed the door. That weekend, my lawyer Ben called. There's been a request, he said. From Madison. She wants to initiate mediation. I almost laughed. Mediation? She says she just wants a chance to explain. Privately. Not in court. I thought for a moment. Then nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Set the meeting. But it won't go how she expects. Monday, 10 a.m. A conference room in a neutral office space. Gray walls. Cold coffee. Legal pads. Madison arrived 5 minutes late. Palmer came with her. They sat across from me like business partners. Like this was a negotiation. Like they hadn't tried to bury me with rumors 2 weeks earlier. The mediator, a tired woman named Claire, smiled neutrally. Let's begin. Madison spoke first. And of course, she smiled. Dad, she said, voice warm. We all made mistakes. I think we can agree. I'm not here to agree, I interrupted. I'm here to make a record. Claire looked up. A record? I nodded. Of what happens when manipulation wears a mask of love. Madison frowned. I don't think this tone is helpful. And I don't think your tone helped when you broadcasted lies about me to 2,000 strangers on Instagram. Palmer tried to interject, but I raised a hand. You don't get to speak. You don't get to talk over me in my time. The room went still. I continued. You had a chance to talk. You had a chance to apologize. You had every opportunity to tell me the truth, and instead, you twisted it. Online. In private. In my home. Madison's voice cracked. I was just trying to create stability. For who? Them? Or yourself? She blinked, then whispered. I was scared. And for the first time, I believed her. But that didn't change the facts. I'm not angry anymore, I said quietly. But I'm not your door. I'm not your wallet. And I'm no longer your silence. The mediator made a small note. I wish you well, I said. But from this point forward, we speak through lawyers. Not through guilt. Madison didn't respond. She just nodded once. It was the smallest motion. But I saw it. She knew it was over. Back at home, I sat on my porch as the sun slipped behind the trees. There was no victory parade. No celebration. Just quiet. But it wasn't the silence of loss. It was the silence of reclaimed ground. The house. The name. The peace. All mine again. And this time, it stays that way. I thought the storm had passed. I'd drawn the line. Served the papers. Walked out of mediation without looking back. But people like Madison don't let go easily. Especially when they believe they've been embarrassed. Especially when they've mistaken silence for surrender their entire life. It started with an envelope. Hand-delivered. Cream-colored. Heavy stock. Inside, a letter from her attorney. 5 pages. Professional. Cold. Our client, Ms. Madison Brennan, asserts her emotional and informal financial investment in the Lakehurst property. Unlawfully evicted from premises under a verbal understanding. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. I stopped reading at that point. My hands didn't shake. My pulse didn't rise. All I felt was disappointment. Not because she'd gone this far, but because, once again, she misunderstood who I was. I called Ben. He already had the document open. Anything here I should actually be worried about? I asked. Legally? No. It's posturing. She's hoping you'll settle. Emotionally? He paused. Well, it might sting, if you still cared what she thinks. I smiled a little. I think I stopped caring the moment she posted a photo of my house and called me heartless. Good, Ben said, because this is going to get messy before it gets clean. The next week passed like molasses. Emails, letters, demands. Her lawyer kept throwing words like compassion, agreement, co-ownership, lifetime intentions. They all danced around the truth. Madison didn't want peace. She wanted control, and she was furious I'd taken it back. On Friday, her attorney requested an informal settlement meeting. Ben said, "It's your call." I thought about it for a minute, then nodded. Let's hear what fantasy world they've built. We met at a law firm downtown. Glass walls, expensive lighting, fake smiles. Madison wasn't there. Just Palmer and a young attorney with too much gel in his hair and not enough understanding of property law. They offered a proposal. Madison would relinquish all claims in exchange for a one-time $250,000 family transition fund, a future stake in the villa upon my passing, a signed letter of reconciliation to help repair the public narrative. I almost laughed. Instead, I leaned forward and said, "Let me be clear. There is no future stake. There is no transition fund. And the only narrative I care about is one where I sleep in peace at night, in a home no one tried to steal from me." The lawyer blinked. Palmer shifted in his chair. I stood. Tell Madison she can't shame her way into ownership. Then I left. The next morning, I went to the villa. Not to confront. To remember. It was cloudy. Quiet. Still. Inside, I walked room by room. Ran my hand along the kitchen counter Elaine once loved. Sat in the old leather armchair by the window. The one Madison never liked because it smelled like history. I let myself feel it. The grief. The betrayal. The strength it took to fight back. And then, I smiled. Because I knew exactly what I'd do next. That afternoon, I made 2 phone calls. First, to Ben. I want to donate the villa. He went silent. To whom? A charity. Housing assistance. Something that'll help people who don't lie to get what they want. He slowly exhaled. You sure? Absolutely. But with a clause. What kind? That I retain full lifetime use. No sale. No handover. Not until I'm gone. Ben chuckled. Strategic generosity. I like it. And make sure Madison can never legally contest the trust. She won't like this. She doesn't like many things that aren't hers. The second call was to someone I hadn't spoken to in 2 years. Her name was Georgia, Elaine's old friend. A no-nonsense woman who once helped us fundraise for a shelter during a rough winter. She picked up on the second ring. Charles, is this really you? It is, I said. And I have a house I'd like to offer. She gasped. Wait, you mean the house? Yes, and I want to make sure it goes to people who deserve peace. There was silence on the line. Then Georgia whispered, Elaine would be so proud of you. I didn't reply. My throat was too tight. By Tuesday morning, the paperwork was ready. The villa would be transferred to the Everlight Foundation for Transitional Housing, a cause Elaine had once championed in her church bulletin. And me? I would remain its full-time occupant. No one could contest it. No one could claim it. And Madison would receive nothing. Not a key. Not a promise. Not a future right. Nothing. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. A message from Madison. You just filed something. What did you do? I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, another came. Don't do this. Please. Not like this. Then a third. We can fix it. I'll come by. We can talk. I read each one, then placed the phone face down. Because some things don't need answers. Some things speak for themselves. And this time, I was finally listening. Some endings don't come with fireworks or shouting. They arrive quietly, like dust settling after a storm, or like the final creak of an old door closing for the last time. That's how it felt the morning I signed the papers. Not triumphant, not bitter, just still, as if something long overdue had finally been put to rest. Ben sat across from me in the quiet office, his usual calm presence grounding the moment. He didn't rush me, didn't speak unnecessarily. He simply waited while I signed the last page that would transfer the Lakehurst Villa to the Everlight Foundation, the one Elaine had once donated to quietly, never asking for recognition, just believing that shelter meant dignity. When the ink dried, Ben gave a small nod. "It's done," he said, his voice low. "The villa is no longer in your name, but the trust guarantees full lifetime residency. They can't sell it, contest it, or interfere. Madison is legally removed from all future claims." I didn't smile. I didn't feel the urge to celebrate. What I felt was quieter than that, a release of weight I hadn't realized I was still carrying. I thanked him, shook his hand, and stepped out into the sunlit street, the air cooler than expected, as if the sky itself understood what had just changed. Later that afternoon, I returned to the villa, not to pack or inspect, but simply to sit, to exist inside the space without fear of it being taken from me again. The lake behind the house shimmered in a calm kind of way, the trees lining the path down to the dock standing still, as if they were listening, too. I made coffee the way Elaine used to, strong and slightly sweet, and drank it from the old green mug Madison had once insisted was too ugly to keep, but which Elaine had loved. I sat in silence, not the kind that feels empty, but the kind that means something has finally settled. Not fixed, but finished. Madison didn't take long to find out. 2 days later, I heard tires crunching against the gravel path just past noon, followed by a car door slamming with the kind of force that always announces confrontation. My phone buzzed, and without even checking it, I knew it was her. "You need to come outside. Right now." I didn't. Instead, I waited, standing just inside the threshold, letting her feel what it was like to knock on a door that wasn't hers to open. She didn't knock. She walked in, or rather, stormed in, her expression somewhere between shock and outrage, her voice sharp and trembling as she spoke. "You gave it away? To a charity?" she asked, almost breathless, like the words themselves were too absurd to be real. "Yes," I said simply, and I watched her try to absorb it. "You had no right," she snapped, stepping closer, her arms tense at her sides. "I had every right," I replied. "It was mine. And now it isn't. Not to you. Not to Palmer. Not to anyone who treats legacy like leverage." She moved quickly through the house, her eyes darting across furniture, curtains, photos, trying to locate anything that still belonged to her, but finding only reminders of what she lost. "This was supposed to be for the family," she said, her voice quieter now, almost pleading. "You said this house was for all of us." I followed her gaze to the living room window, where sunlight spilled across the floor like a spotlight. "I said that when I believed you'd honor it," I replied. "But now I see you wanted something different. You didn't want a legacy, Madison. You wanted an inheritance you didn't have to wait for." She sat down at the table, the one where Elaine and I had shared 1,000 unremarkable breakfasts, the kind of memories you don't photograph, but that live inside your chest forever. Her shoulders slumped a little. "I know you think I'm selfish," she said softly. "And maybe I am, but I was trying to make things work. For Palmer. For his parents. For us. You were trying to make them work by walking over something I built," I said. "That's not family, Madison. That's extraction." She flinched. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it did. And when it did, you still didn't stop. You lied to the bank. You forged paperwork. You humiliated me publicly. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a pattern." She looked down at her hands, twisting a silver ring she'd worn since college, and said quietly, "I was scared. I didn't know how to fix it. I thought maybe if we could just reclaim it, rebuild." "No," I interrupted. "You thought if you pushed hard enough, I'd fold. You gambled that I was too tired to fight." She stood slowly, walked toward the fireplace, and for a while she just stared at it, as if hoping for some final argument to present itself, something that would unravel what had just become permanent. "You know you're going to die in this house alone," she said, not cruelly, but like a tired observation she thought might still have power. I didn't even look away. I'd rather die alone surrounded by truth than live in a house filled with manipulation wearing the mask of love. She exhaled sharply, and when she turned to me again, her voice had taken on that old edge, the one she used as a teenager when she didn't get her way. "You think this makes you strong?" she asked. "It makes you cold. It makes you small." "No," I said. "It makes me free." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she walked back to the door, slowly this time, like her body understood something her pride didn't want to admit. But just before she stepped outside, she turned. "Mom would have been ashamed of what you did." For the first time, I felt a flicker of something, not pain, but a deep, steady ache, the kind that comes from watching someone you love twist the memory of someone who's gone. "No," I said softly. "She would have seen through what you tried to do long before I did." And that was when it happened, the first crack. Her lip trembled. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, anything, but couldn't find the words. "I really thought I was doing the right thing," she whispered. "I know," I said. "That's the saddest part." Then she left. I stood by the window, watching her drive away, and for a moment I thought about all the years we had before this. Birthday candles, math homework, late-night calls after heartbreaks. All real, all cherished, and all now part of a past that no longer defined what we had become. The silence that followed wasn't oppressive or sharp. It was clean, like fresh sheets on a bed no one else had touched, like the kind of quiet you earn after walking through too much noise. That night, I boxed up the last of her things, not out of spite, not as an act of closure, but because the house deserved clarity. I didn't burn them. I didn't destroy them. I simply placed them gently into storage, where they couldn't take up space that no longer belonged to them. Because some love you release, and some boundaries you seal. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without my phone on the nightstand, without checking messages, without worrying what she'd post or say or twist next. And in that stillness, I realized something important. Peace doesn't always come from winning. Sometimes, it comes from no longer needing to. There's a moment in every power struggle when the aggressor realizes their usual tactics no longer work, and rather than retreat, they change masks. That's what Madison did next. She tried silence. She tried pressure. She tried lawyers. Now she tried the one thing she thought I couldn't defend against, public shame. It began with whispers, a phone call from my cousin in Vermont, casual, but laced with concern. "She called me, Charles," Marie said. "She told me you've been distant, cold, that you're not well." I leaned back in my chair, watching the wind move gently through the pine trees outside the villa window. "Did she mention why?" I asked. "She said you're confused, that you've been forgetting things, that you gave away the house because you're not thinking clearly." There it was. She wasn't attacking the deed anymore. She was attacking my mind. In the next few days, it grew louder. A friend from church left a voicemail saying she'd heard concerning things. An old business partner emailed me about a family dispute he didn't want to get in the middle of. And then, the worst of it, an anonymous post on a local Facebook group, accompanied by an old photo of the villa in early autumn. Hard to watch a once-respected father fall into decline. When pride replaces love, families break. Elder rights matter too, especially when dementia is involved. They didn't name me. They didn't have to. The words were perfectly chosen. Enough ambiguity to deny malice, but just sharp enough to wound. I knew it was her. And I knew why. Because in Madison's world, if she couldn't win with truth, she'd rewrite the story until someone handed her the sympathy she mistook for power. Ben called that evening. "She's escalating," he said, his voice steady, but serious. "Defamation by insinuation, but subtle enough to avoid liability." "She wants me to react publicly," I replied. "Exactly. She's baiting you." I walked slowly through the house, the echo of her childhood still tucked into the corners of these rooms. And I thought, how strange it is to raise a child on warmth, only for them to use coldness as their weapon of choice. "What do you want to do?" Ben asked. I stopped near the fireplace, staring at the faint scratch on the mantel, a mark from when she'd bumped her scooter into it as a kid. Elaine had never let me fix it. "Nothing," I said at last. "We let her make noise. Let the wind blow. I'll hold still." But staying still isn't always easy. At Sunday service, I felt eyes on me, Curious, quiet, slightly tilted. A woman I'd known for years offered me a sad smile, the kind you give to someone you think is slipping away. No one asked outright, but I could feel the questions pressing in the silence. Was I lonely? Was I unwell? Was I cruel? A week later, Madison tried the most painful angle of all. She sent a letter, not to me, to Georgia, the director of the Everlight Foundation, the woman I had trusted with Elaine's dream. It arrived in a pale blue envelope with her name in clean script, sounding so gentle, so gracious, you might think it came from a grieving daughter. In the letter, she thanked Georgia for taking care of my father and offered to volunteer at the villa, claiming she wanted to reconnect and make peace with our family history. She never once mentioned the lawsuits, the lies, the threats, just words like healing, closure, restoration. Georgia called me immediately. She's clever, she said. Too clever. She's dangerous, I replied. Do you want me to respond? Yes, I said, but not how she expects. We drafted a reply together, professional, polite, and cold as glass. Thank you for your offer. However, due to the sensitive nature of recent events, we believe it's best that all family members refrain from involvement at this time. We wish you well on your personal journey. No room for drama. No door left open. Just a wall she couldn't climb. But even walls can't block everything. That weekend, I ran into Donna, Palmer's mother, at the grocery store. She spotted me near the produce section, walked over like we were still pretending to be civil, and gave me a smile that barely reached her eyes. Charles, she said, we've missed seeing you around. It's such a shame things ended up like this. I nodded slightly. Yes, it is. She lowered her voice. You know, Madison's been heartbroken. She talks about you every day. She's really trying to make amends. I turned to her slowly. Donna, the day I revoked access to the house, she threatened to ruin me. She's followed through on almost every word of that threat. Donna's smile flickered. She's young, hurt, confused. Don't you think forgiveness? Forgiveness. I interrupted. I gave her 30 years of trust. She traded it for leverage. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Charles, you're all she has left. I met her gaze. No, I said. I'm all she used to have. That night, Madison sent a text. It was short, carefully vague. I heard from Georgia. I see where we stand. I didn't reply. The next one came hours later. I miss Mom. I miss what we were. I'm sorry you don't. Still, I said nothing. Because silence, I had learned, was not cruelty. It was clarity. And for the first time in our lives, she was finally learning what it meant to face herself, without a shield made of my tolerance. The villa was quiet that week. I cleaned the shed, trimmed the old hedge Elaine had loved, cooked dinner slowly, listening to records that still carried the warmth of her voice in the spaces between notes. I didn't speak to anyone, not out of bitterness, but because sometimes solitude is not a punishment. Sometimes it's protection. On the final night of that week, I stood out by the lake, the water still as a held breath, and I whispered something I hadn't said in years. Thank you, Elaine, for this peace. Not for the house, not for the legal advice she never got to give, but for the quiet strength she left inside me, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be heard. And in that moment, with the moon rising over the pines and no more footsteps at my door, I finally understood. Madison could scream, lie, twist, manipulate, but the villa was mine again, not just on paper, but in spirit, because I had made the one choice she never expected me to make. I stopped defending myself, and that is when I truly won. It's strange how the mind works when silence settles in. When there are no new battles to fight, no letters arriving in the mail, no calls to return or lawyers to brief, you begin to hear the echoes you've been avoiding for years. Memories you had tucked away in drawers marked, not now, or not helpful, but the quiet makes them louder. And for the first time since Madison walked out of this house for good, I allowed myself to open those drawers, slowly, carefully, but fully. She was 5 when I first noticed it. Not anything malicious, just little choices. At a birthday party, she cried when another child got the blue balloon she wanted. Not because she couldn't have another, but because someone else had it first. Elaine calmed her down, told her life wouldn't always feel fair. But I remember the way Madison looked at that girl, like something had been taken from her. Not something physical, but something she believed belonged to her just because she'd wanted it more. I chalked it up to childhood stubbornness. I didn't realize then that was her first lesson in ownership. and she never forgot it. In middle school, she forged my signature on a permission slip. Nothing dramatic, just a field trip to a museum. But when I found out and confronted her, she didn't cry or apologize. She smiled. Everyone else was going. I knew you'd say yes anyway. And she wasn't wrong. I probably would have. But something about her confidence unsettled me. It wasn't the lie that bothered me. It was the assumption that the truth was optional if the outcome benefited her. She didn't see it as deception. She saw it as deficiency. There were more signs. In high school, she dated a boy named Calvin. Kind, soft-spoken, the kind of kid who carried her books without being asked. When he broke up with her before prom, Madison didn't cry. She posted online that he'd cheated, even though he hadn't, and within hours, his locker had been vandalized with red marker. She never admitted she started the rumor. But I knew, and I said nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to believe she was capable of that kind of cold calculation. Elaine noticed it too. I remember one night, long after Madison had gone to bed, my wife turned to me and said, quietly, without anger, "She's going to break people if we don't teach her how to lose." I nodded. Then I poured another drink and changed the subject. Looking back now, I see how often I mistook intelligence for wisdom and ambition for character. Madison was sharp, driven, persuasive. She could talk her way out of anything, charm her way through anything, and if all else failed, she'd flip the script and make you feel like the villain for even questioning her. I watched her do it to teachers, to friends, to Elaine, and eventually, to me. But each time, I told myself she was just figuring herself out, that she'd mature, that love would soften her edges. I never imagined that love would become her favorite tool. After Elaine passed, everything shifted. The grief was real, I don't doubt that. But so was the opportunity. Madison began visiting more often, offering help, taking notes on finances I hadn't shown anyone, offering to handle things I hadn't asked her to touch. At first, I was grateful. Then, I was tired. And when I questioned a decision, like her suggestion to refinance the villa or change the insurance policy, she'd look at me the same way she had at age 5, when someone else took the balloon she wanted. Like I'd taken something that should have already been hers. One night, a few months after Elaine's funeral, I overheard her talking to Palmer in the guest room. She didn't know I was in the hallway. I wasn't meant to hear it. "I'm not waiting 10 years for this place," she said. Palmer mumbled something, but she kept going. "He won't live forever. And if we don't start making plans now, someone else will end up with what we deserve." I remember standing there, paralyzed, not from betrayal, but from recognition. Because in that moment, I realized something I had never said out loud. She wasn't planning for my life. She was planning for my absence. The memories came faster after that. The forged emails. The tours she gave of the villa when I wasn't home. The way she called it, our family property, to outsiders, even when I corrected her. And still, I said nothing. Not because I didn't see it, but because I didn't want to be the kind of father who believed his daughter would manipulate him. Now, with the house quiet and the lake still outside my window, I can finally admit it. The signs were always there. She didn't change. She revealed. And the only thing more painful than realizing that is realizing that I let her. But there's power in truth, even when it comes late. There's healing in finally naming what you were too afraid to see. I don't hate Madison. I don't want revenge. But I no longer feel guilt for protecting the one thing she was never taught to protect. Boundaries. This house is mine. Not because I paid for it, but because I finally understood what it means to defend something with dignity. Not anger, not shouting, not shame. Just clarity. Just truth. The lake was still that evening. The pines didn't whisper. The wind didn't move. And for once, the silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like closure. When someone like Madison realizes she can't take a thing by force, she shifts her focus to its structure. She stops trying to break down the door and starts looking for cracks in the foundation. And that's exactly what she did next. It began subtly, as most clever attacks do, not with another lawyer's letter or late-night texts, but through whispers inside the very organization I had entrusted with Elaine's legacy. The Everlight Foundation had moved quickly since our agreement. The trust was active. Renovations were being planned. A family with 2 young children had already been chosen to move into the guest cottage, and the board had begun exploring ways to expand transitional housing in the area. Everything was moving forward, until one of the junior board members forwarded me an email. It was from a newly formed LLC. Clean website. Professional branding. A promising offer. The name at the bottom? M. Jameson. Madison's married name. The email was polite, courteous, and framed as a business proposal. It offered an investment opportunity to Everlight, a partnership to develop additional housing on adjacent land, with the promise of reduced operational costs and expert oversight in family resource allocation. It was, on the surface, generous. But the moment I read it, I could feel the fingerprints all over it. Because this was no investment. This was an infiltration. I called Georgia immediately. I saw it too, she said before I could finish reading the subject line. She's hiding behind a company name. She thinks we'll bite, Georgia replied. Because the offer looks clean, and we do need funding. Don't take it, I said firmly. Not a dollar. Not a meeting. Not a single reply. Georgia paused. Charles, she's gotten smarter. She's talking to people. I heard one of the consultants mention her name during a planning call. Someone thinks she's a potential donor. I closed my eyes, leaned back in the chair. Of course, if she couldn't reclaim the house, she'd try to embed herself into its future. She wasn't interested in sheltering families. She wanted her name back on the deed, even if it came dressed in the language of goodwill. The next week brought more signals. One of the board advisors forwarded me a LinkedIn post from Palmer, full of glowing praise for private family partnerships in community housing. Another article appeared in a local paper, quoting unnamed sources close to Everlight who wished to see more transparency in recent property acquisitions. And then came the quiet meeting request, a coffee invitation from someone in Everlight's finance team. It's probably nothing, he said. But I was approached about a discreet capital injection from someone claiming to know the original donor. She implied there'd been a misunderstanding, that you were sick. There it was again. The same story, recycled through a cleaner voice. I asked him one question. Would you believe her if she weren't rich? He hesitated. No, he admitted. Then you have your answer. I spent the following days putting safeguards in place. I requested a full audit of external communications. I asked Georgia to brief the entire board on donor privacy, reminding them that any relationship to me did not equal authority. And then I took a final step, one I had resisted for a long time. I wrote a public letter. It was simple, heartfelt, and clear. I didn't name Madison, but I told the truth. I explained my gift to Everlight, how it was rooted in memory, in love, in my wife's dream. I spoke of the importance of boundaries, of choosing legacy over inheritance, of the pain that comes when family forgets the line between love and leverage. The letter was published on the foundation's site and sent to our local paper. Within hours, my inbox was full. Dozens of messages, quiet ones, kind ones. Strangers thanking me. Fellow parents saying, you just put into words what I've been feeling for years. Even an old colleague, who had lost his farm in a bitter divorce, wrote simply, you chose peace. That takes more strength than people realize. The next day, I received one more message. From her. You're trying to destroy me now? Publicly? Do you even care that I'm your daughter? I read it slowly, and for the first time in this whole mess, I didn't feel anger, or sadness, or doubt. I felt done. Not in a bitter, slamming the door kind of way, but in the way you feel when you finally take a suitcase off your shoulders that you've been carrying far too long. I didn't reply, because there was nothing left to say. That evening, I walked through the villa like I was seeing it for the first time again. The halls didn't echo with tension. The air felt clean. The walls, safe. And for the first time, I realized. She had tried everything. Guilt, control, public image, legal pressure, even infiltration. And still, I had the one thing she couldn't touch. Integrity. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was a mirror. And she couldn't look into it without seeing her reflection in full. A reflection that didn't lie. A reflection she couldn't rewrite. And that, more than the loss itself, was what haunted her. It had been almost 3 weeks since the last message. The air had shifted, not outside, but around me. It was lighter, like the space had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. And then, one quiet Thursday morning, she came back. Not with lawyers. Not with posts. Not with plans. She came alone. And she brought a pie. I heard the car before I saw it. Familiar tires on familiar gravel. I didn't rush to the window. I just waited. A soft knock. No anger in it. No tension. When I opened the door, Madison stood there, hair pulled back, sweater loose, arms wrapped awkwardly around a homemade peach pie she'd clearly bought from the bakery on 7th Street. "Hi, Dad," she said. Her voice was light, too light, as if nothing had happened. "I was just passing through," she continued. "Thought I'd stop by. Brought you something sweet." She handed me the pie like a peace offering, or perhaps a test, to see if I'd accept the gesture and let her back in. I looked down at it, then up at her. She didn't look angry. She didn't look sad. She looked calculated, the way she used to look when she asked for a larger allowance after getting good grades. The smile just wide enough, the voice just soft enough. But I didn't invite her in. I simply said, "Thank you." Then I stepped aside and waited. She didn't move at first, maybe surprised that I hadn't slammed the door or demanded she leave. But when I didn't resist, she walked past me slowly, as if entering sacred ground. She looked around the living room, her eyes drifting to the small bookshelf, the sun spilling across the rug, the smell of coffee still lingering from my morning routine. "It hasn't changed much," she said. "It still smells like home." I said nothing. I wanted to see how long it would take for her mask to slip. She wandered to the kitchen, ran her fingers along the countertop. "I've been thinking a lot," she said after a while. "About everything. About how far things went." I leaned against the wall, arms folded. She turned to face me. "I messed up. I know I did. I was stressed, scared, grieving in my own way. I didn't know how to ask for help without sounding entitled." She paused. "I'm not here to argue. I just want to talk. No agenda." That word, agenda, caught me. Because people with no agenda never feel the need to say it. And people who've truly changed don't start with a pie. They start with truth. Real, broken, raw truth. But Madison had always learned to dress her intentions in softness, as if sweetness could erase sharpness. "I don't want the house," she continued, as if reading my hesitation. "I understand now. I really do. I just want us back." She took a small step forward. "I miss you, and I know Mom would have wanted us to heal." There it was again, Elaine's name, used like a spell, not in reverence, but in persuasion. I stayed still, not cold, not unkind, just aware. "Madison," I said gently, "what exactly do you want from me right now?" She blinked. "I just want peace." "Peace for you?" I asked. "Or peace because your name is now connected to the wrong people in the wrong rooms?" Her eyes narrowed, just for a second, then softened again. "Does it matter?" she asked. "If the outcome is the same?" I tilted my head. "Yes, it always matters why we do things." She sighed and sat down at the table, the pie still untouched between us. "You think the worst of me. I've learned to see all of you." She stared at the wood grain in silence, then said softly, "I'm tired of fighting." I believed her, but that didn't mean I trusted her. "I'm tired too," I replied. "But peace isn't a treaty signed under pressure. It's a way of living, a way of showing up, again and again, even when you're not in control." She looked up at me then, not angry, not pleading, just uncertain, like a person who had used every tool in their box and found none of them worked anymore. "You really aren't going to forgive me, are you?" she asked finally. "I already did," I said. "But forgiveness isn't the same as restoration." She tilted her head. "Then what is it?" "It's a boundary. One that says, I no longer owe you access just because you regret what you did with it." For the first time, she didn't respond quickly. She sat there, in the quiet, and I saw something shift. Not a full transformation, not yet, but maybe the first true recognition of consequence. And that is the hardest thing for someone like Madison to face. Not anger, not loss, but indifference. The kind of indifference that comes from letting go, not out of hatred, but out of peace that no longer negotiates. She stood slowly. "I won't bother you again." I nodded. "Take care of yourself," I said. She hesitated, like she wanted me to stop her, or say her name, or break the spell of calm. But I didn't. I let her walk to the door. And this time, I didn't follow. When she left, she didn't slam the car door. She didn't message. She didn't post. She simply disappeared down the hill. And the silence she left behind wasn't heavy. It was full of everything I never said and didn't need to. Some endings don't echo. They don't announce themselves or demand attention. They arrive slowly, like dusk settling over water, or like the way an old grief fades into something that no longer bites when you breathe. That's how it felt in the weeks after Madison left. No new messages, no letters, no unexpected visitors, just quiet. And for the first time in a long while, it wasn't the kind of quiet that waits for the next storm. It was the kind that means the storm has passed and finally knows it's not welcome here anymore. I spent my mornings walking the gravel path down to the lake, coffee in hand, the chill of early autumn brushing my shoulders like a soft reminder that time moves on whether you resist it or not. Families began to move into the nearby cottages. Not many, just 3 for now. One couple with a newborn, another family of 4 who had lost their home to a fire, and a young teacher who'd left an abusive marriage and was starting over with nothing but a library card and a box of dishes. They didn't know my story. They didn't ask. They were just grateful for warm walls and a view of the lake. And that was enough. One afternoon, I sat on the porch and watched a little girl, no older than 6, chase after a paper plane that had caught the wind. She laughed the way Madison once did when she was small and still believed I could fix anything. And for a moment, I didn't feel loss. I felt legacy, because maybe this was the point all along. Not to pass on a title or a house key, but to offer something that lasts longer than ownership: safety, clarity, stillness. The kind Elaine always believed mattered most. I haven't spoken to Madison since she left that morning with her bakery pie and softened voice. I don't expect to, and maybe that's all right. Maybe love isn't always about reunion. Sometimes it's about release. Letting someone go not because you've stopped caring, but because you finally care enough about yourself to stop bleeding for a bond that no longer breathes. I kept a photo of her on the hallway shelf, not as a shrine, not as a trap for nostalgia, but as a reminder of what I gave and what I could not save. There is grace in that, I think, in accepting the limits of love, in honoring what you tried to build, even if it collapsed under someone else's hands. The villa still stands, sunlit and strong. The roof doesn't leak. The steps don't creak. The wind doesn't rattle the windows like it used to when Elaine was sick and the house felt too big for just one heartbeat. Now it's full of life, of new stories, of quiet footsteps that don't demand anything from me. And that's the real inheritance. Not square footage, not land, but the ability to walk through your own home and know you didn't betray yourself to keep the peace. I write sometimes. Nothing public, nothing grand, just notes, reflections, sometimes letters I never send. To Elaine, to Madison, to the version of me that stayed silent too long. But they all end the same way now. I'm still here, and I'm finally free. One evening, I lit a small candle on the dock. No ceremony, no occasion, just a quiet moment for Elaine. I whispered into the wind, not expecting an answer, but feeling the weight lift anyway. I did it, love. I didn't let them rewrite us. And as the candle's flame flickered in the soft lake air, I smiled. Not because it was over, but because I'm still standing. And she isn't knocking anymore.